Friday, July 20th, 2035. The Alien Fortress, Tethys Seamount in the Pacific Ocean. Mira and I were the first two soldiers to step out of the Psionic Gate. I think we had only about 2 or 3 seconds to take in the environment around us. Nothing I'd seen before, not the black sites, UFOs, or Advent megacities could prepare me for an environment as alien as this one. Purple, green, and blue light overwhelmed my vision for a moment before the colored shapes resolved themselves into an ultra-futuristic place. We had arrived in some kind of massive scientific facility. I saw computers with holographic screens and keyboards that seemed to hover in midair. Windows in the far wall revealed some kind of growery or greenhouse where purple fauna bloomed beneath violet lights. The walls and ceilings around us were transparent, revealing that the alien fortress lay far beneath a vast sea of water. A cloud of jellyfish swirled above my head, while a vaguely familiar-looking shark swam past the wall to our right. Just when I started to realize that we were still on Earth, I heard a voice. It resonated throughout the chamber and echoed off every surface. Just as the Stormbreaker squad exited the portal and arrived, they held their hands to their ears as the voice assaulted their senses. Such loss, such needless waste. You force our hand, yet still we offer peace. Join us, and your world will be spared. There was a flurry of movement in the greenhouse just ahead of us. As Ignatius brought up the rear and confirmed that all of the Stormbreakers were now on site, Mira Mihaka pointed towards the greenhouse and said, "The Crypt of the Elders is that way," Mira told us. "While their power extends far and wide, their physical forms are confined to this place." "Wait," Soylent said. "Did she just call it a crypt? Are the Elders dead already?" "Death holds a much different meaning for the Elders," Mira clarified. The squad started to advance, crossing the lab and stacking up against the door to the greenhouse, where we could now hear alien chatter inside. Behind us, the Psionic Gate came to life as members of 2nd Squad began to make their appearance. "On my go," I said to the team. "Breach and clear in 3, 2, 1, go!" Kathleen kicked the door open while Matthew threw a flashbang into the room. A sectoid screamed in surprise as 17 Stormbreakers erupted into the greenhouse, guns blazing. We cleared the room right down to the very corners, gunning down 3 sectoids and a couple of Vipers. "Clear!" Chihiro shouted. "Room's clear," Ignatius confirmed. "You harbor such blind hatred for us," the ethereal voice said to us, their voice seeming to come out of nowhere. "We cannot understand it. Our intentions for your world were never hostile. They are still not. You are a part of us." Soylent smashed a window with his anti-materiel rifle and then shot an alien on the other side. "They actually expect us to buy any of this," he said in an exasperated way. "More distrust." The ethereal sounded offended. "Perhaps you would find more reassurance in our words if..." The ethereal trailed off and fell silent as we exploded forth and began raiding the next room. Freed up from the distractions, we were able to focus on the tough fight in front of us. By this point, alarms had been raised throughout the entire fortress, and a disturbingly large force of aliens met us in the next chamber, which looked like some kind of manufactory. A veritable horde of mutons had taken up defensive positions all over the facility, and their lines had been augmented with mech troopers and... "Another goddamn sectopod!" I shouted. "Doomsday, Electo, Freud, keep it busy. Mihaka, Paradox, and Vampire, get round the enemy's flank." "On it," Akira replied. "Hell yeah, it's killing time," Holly cheered. Keeping my head low, I moved along the XCOM battle line as it started to form, ordering soldiers into place and calling out targets. 2nd Squad was now all the way through the gate and was starting to funnel their own troops into the fight as well. "Holy shit, Robinson!" Jane Kelly gasped as she took cover behind a huge piece of machinery and joined the fight. "Where the hell did you get almost 3 dozen mutons?" "I'm just lucky," I shouted over the noise of gunfire. "Where's third squad?" "On their way now. Keep up the pressure." And then, somehow, above the noise of nearly 100 weapons firing on both sides, a voice made itself heard. It was the most kind, sweet, motherly voice you could possibly imagine. In my mind's eye, I pictured the voice belonging to an angel from heaven. Somehow, without any plausible explanation why, every member of the final platoon knew at once that we were hearing the voice of the Angelus Ethereal, the undisputed enemy leader. "So many were risked to give you life, Jericho. And for what? For violence, for war, for death. Truly, you were meant for something more than this." To my left, Jericho launched a handful of soulfire towards the enemy positions before ducking back into cover. She rolled her eyes as the Angelus Ethereal's voice faded. "And they're talking to me," Jericho complained. "Great. Just great." Holly and Yutaka fired a pair of rocket-propelled grenades into a sectopod's flank before it could get the chance to stand up at full height. The war machine teetered over and collapsed, crushing a group of mutons and sending a whole squad of them fleeing. Behind me, I heard a shout, "Fourth squad's here!" Dwayne Gardner skidded into cover, using psionic power to deflect incoming weapons fire away from his shoulders. "Gardner!" I shouted. "Is that everyone?" "Yeah, that's everyone." I stood up and shouted at the top of my lungs, "Platoon! Push forward!" Throughout history, there have been many armchair generals who discount the human wave attack as a senseless strategy used only by idiotic commanders. Let me tell you, those people have never been on the receiving end of a human wave. And more importantly, they've never been on the giving end. When 52 heavily armed men and women all broke cover and started moving toward the enemy line, firing their weapons as fast as they could pull the triggers, it had a psychological effect on friend and foe alike. With comrades all around me, left and right and front and back, I felt more secure than I should have, in spite of the fact that I was completely exposed out in the open. Advancing inexorably, we poured a hellish storm of fire and metal into the enemy ranks, sending tens of thousands of rounds downrange in a matter of seconds. The overwhelming cascade of fire struck the enemy line like a tornado. Any and everything the enemy was using for cover was swiftly destroyed. Blood and dust and smoke filled the air as the alien formation collapsed and broke beneath our assault. "They're running!" Sophie screamed. "They're falling back!" "Don't stop!" I shouted. "Everyone keep pushing!" "We offered your people hope," the Angelus Ethereal preached above the sound of the battle. "A brighter future, to be something greater, yet still you refuse. What more can we offer you than the greatest gift of all?" "Somebody shut that voice up!" Sophie shrieked while gunning down a muton. At the back of the line, Ignatius had not fired his weapon once. Instead, he was using his gift to protect the platoon from enemy fire, deflecting plasma beams and Gauss rounds as best he could. Odette Fournier prowled the flanks like a panther, making sure nobody ambushed Ignatius from the sides. "Your promise of gifts and salvation are lies built upon lies," Ignatius roared, "and now the whole world knows." So much time spent needlessly resisting, fighting your ascension to something greater. And yet, here you are, just as we envisioned. In your efforts to prevent the Avatar's creation, you have followed the path we set forth, truly exceeding even our own lofty expectations, Jericho. "Shut him out, Jericho!" Isis screamed above the din. "More alien lies!" "Screw your expectations!" Jericho shouted at the Angelus Ethereal, even though she couldn't see her. "I'm not living by anyone's script anymore. I'm not going to be a puppet." The last cluster of mutons resisting our human wave attack was suddenly torn asunder in a horrifically graphic way as Jericho unleashed a psionic storm. A swirling vortex of psionic energy rippled around the rift she had opened in the middle of the enemy lines. In seconds, more than half of the enemy force was annihilated. Panicking at the sight of their comrades being destroyed, most of the alien force broke from their positions and started to fall back, retreating further into the fortress. The soldiers of the final platoon were left stunned by Jericho's sudden display of power. Some soldiers hesitated, but I urged them onward. "Follow Jericho!" I shouted to my troops. "Keep up with her!" Sticking close to Jericho, the soldiers of the final platoon surged through the alien fortress with all the destructive intensity of the apocalypse. Every computer in sight was smashed. Thermite demolition charges fitted to machinery, and everything else was put to the flame. Forcing our way out of the manufactory, we came across something that made quite a few of us sick. The next chamber was huge. It was probably 600 meters wide and another 900 long. In this space, we found a near-perfect recreation of a neighborhood. 20 American-style suburban houses, complete with yards, a cross street, and a network of power lines, sat in the heart of the alien fortress, looking quite as though some detail-oriented collector had removed the neighborhood and placed it here with the greatest possible care. The one and only thing that seemed out of place was the street sign at the corner, which said, Maple Street, USA. Oh, and there were also at least 3 platoons of alien fighters swarming through the neighborhood, setting up defensive positions and getting ready to fight the human invaders. Time and again, you have rejected our wisdom, and still we show compassion and generosity, the Angelus Ethereal carried on. But as with all things, this too must end. We can no longer afford to suffer your transgressions. I don't know what she means by that, Hal yelled, but I think we're out of time. Let's finish this. The final platoon surged into the facsimile neighborhood. Jericho, Akira, and Mira took the lead, blasting the enemy with a wide array of psionic powers. Fighting on in transplanted human territory, the forces of XCOM and the Resistance finally had home field advantage. Navigating the boulevard and structures with ease, Maple Street, USA quickly became a kill zone. Mutons, sectoids, vipers, mech troopers, chrysalids, codices, and archons all scrambled to find cover and concealment. Mimic beacons, I shouted. Draw them out! All over the battlefield, there were flashes of blue light as mimic beacons were deployed along XCOM's new battle line. Without fail, the holographic duplicates of our soldiers drew fire from the enemy, giving away their hiding places. Our next volley of return fire was so vicious and lethal, it drew a response of a different kind. I admire your tenacity, XCOM, hissed a familiar voice. Bringing the fight to the Elder's inner sanctum. That's a bold strategy. Are you ready to see if it pays off? My brother is here, Mira shouted. Everyone find cover! Crack! The chosen hunter didn't miss a mark. On his first shot, a soldier from 2nd Squad went down. Hit in the chest, the poor man didn't even have the breath left to scream. Man down! Jane Kelly shouted. I can get to him! Tsubaki Endo yelled. Someone give me cover fire! Dragon! I yelled. Fangirl needs help! Let's do it like Hiroshima! My wife called back. Together, the 3 of us executed a leapfrogging movement. While one of us dashed to cover, the other 2 were laying down suppressing fire on Gurmon Madron, forcing him to cease fire and hunker down in cover. Finally, Chihiro used her laser rifle to keep the enemy's heads down while Tsubaki and I made the final dash to the wounded soldier. It was Bernard von Unfall, the German soldier who bore the most responsibility for killing the chosen warlock a couple days ago. While Tsubaki grabbed von Unfall and started to drag him out of the line of fire, I saw something hit the side of a 2015-era minivan and roll along the pavement towards us. Stun grenade! It was too late. The device went off with a loud bang. Suddenly, lights and sounds didn't make sense. I could barely hear Chihiro screaming to my left before a voice cut through the chaos. "Piper, recovery protocol!" A powerful electric jolt hit me in the head and spread out from there, shocking my whole body back to its senses, quite literally. Across the street, I saw Isis Decker calling her gremlin drone back, ready to load another nano medikit into it. Looking around, I realized Chihiro was still down. She was kneeling on the ground, holding her head in both hands. I started to move toward her when Isis shouted, "On your left! Trojan! Hunter, on your left!" Once again, Madron had gotten so close he could have reached out and touched me. Instinctively, I raised the Arashi and fired. Mira's shotgun went off with the force of a cannon and knocked me over backwards. The car next to Madron got hit with the full force of the blast. Knocked clean off its wheels, the minivan rolled over and came to rest on its side while the chosen hunter laughed at me. "You stupid monkey. If that gun didn't do my sister any good, what makes you think it'll work for you?" Madron drew his pistol and took aim at me. Before I could do anything, there was a chaotic eruption of light and sound. Dwayne Gardner and Akira had attacked the chosen hunter simultaneously. Two sets of celestial gauntlets projected intense beams of psionic energy into the chosen, hitting him so hard that he dropped his pistol and fell back. Activating their shard blades, Akira and Dwayne both charged. I jumped to my feet and got out of their way just in time. A jet of light shot out of the hunter's free hand and connected with Akira's chest. In an instant, the chosen hunter had completed a psionic inversion. He had forced Akira to teleport against her will. She rematerialized on the spot where Madron had just been standing and suddenly found herself on the receiving end of Dwayne's attack. The Hawaiian Templar saw what was happening and intentionally stumbled, grazing Akira with his blades instead of impaling her. Meanwhile, Gurmon Madron had reappeared in Akira's spot, which was behind me. In a lightning-fast decision, I picked a plan of attack. Turning on the spot as quickly as I could, I reached up to my shoulder and grabbed the handle of Mira's katana. Drawing a sword in anger always gives me an adrenaline rush. I was prepared for that. But the psionic energy embedded in the Alarium blade multiplied that feeling 1,000-fold. It felt like I suddenly got all of my strength and stamina back. His pistol fallen on the ground, the hunter started to raise his sniper rifle to fire on me. Gripping my new sword in both hands, I could feel the aches and pains of battle leaving me. I was light on my feet, stronger than I'd ever felt in years. The sword was giving me power. "Strike! Strike now!" An animalistic voice growled in my mind. "Strike with all of your strength!" Screaming like some kind of monster, I swung the katana downward with so much force I could have split steel. With supernatural violence, Mira's katana sliced through Madron's armor and dug into his flesh. Yellow blood sprayed all over my armor. The chosen hunter howled and retreated. Using his grappling hook to escape, Madron pulled himself up onto an open-top observation platform at the end of the simulated neighborhood. "Follow him! Press the attack!" the katana ordered. Screaming like some kind of monster, I swung the katana downward with so much force I could have split steel. With supernatural violence, Mira's katana sliced through Madron's armor and dug into his flesh. Yellow blood sprayed all over my armor. The chosen hunter howled and retreated. Using his grappling hook to escape, Madron pulled himself up onto an open-top observation platform at the end of the simulated neighborhood. "Follow him! Press the attack!" the katana ordered. "Do not let him escape!" Before I could take 2 steps, the hunter finally managed to get the quick draw on me. Just like the assassin's shotgun, the hunter's rifle made a sound like a cannon. I felt a powerful thud, and I was blown clear across the pavement and crash-landed on my back. Opening my eyes, I saw strange, multicolored shapes swirling in front of me before they resolved themselves into a thin trail of smoke curling up from my body armor. I had just taken a Gauss round to the chest. Was I dead? That didn't matter right now. "Get up!" Mira's katana shouted in my mind. "Get up! On your feet! Get up now!" The shock of being hit so hard was wearing off in a hurry. I was surrounded on all sides by the fury and destruction of the battle, by smoke, flames, gunfire, shouting, and explosions, and yet I was totally focused on just one thought: get to Madron. I ran full tilt across the street, scrambled up the ladder to the observation platform where the hunter had fled, and found him unprepared. The chosen hunter must have assumed he had killed me, because he was now focused on sniping other XCOM soldiers, and he kept his eye in the scope until it was far too late. Madron noticed me as I drew the katana back and aimed one hand at my face, preparing to hit me with a psionic blast. Kill! Kill! The katana savored the moment before the deed. Kill all enemies! I drove the katana home, piercing the hunter's damaged armor as though it wasn't even there. I drove the blade all the way into his chest, and then I detached the short tanto blade from its hidden place in the handle. The translucent Illyrium blade flickered with its own internal light, as though some kind of entity inside the blade was throwing itself against the walls of its prison. I thrust the tanto into Madron's heart. At once, the tanto blade got very hot in my hands, in exactly the same way a gifted person gets hot when they discharge psionic energy. In an instant, the tanto blade had siphoned away all of Mon Madron's psionic energy, completely depriving him of his powers. Unable to teleport to his sarcophagus to heal, the chosen hunter was about to die, and stay that way. Panting, the two of us didn't move. Some force compelled me to look at Madron. He looked up from the points where I'd stabbed him, realizing what was about to happen. The chosen hunter coughed and spluttered.
Have to admit, didn't see this one coming. So, this is what it feels like to be afraid? Not my style.
The chosen hunter let out one last ragged breath and slumped over, unmoving. No teleportation. No rapid healing. No resurrections this time. As I heard Madron's expiring breath and watched his eyes roll back, I felt something, a sensation, an emotion that I had never connected with the act of killing before. I'd never felt so satisfied. I was satisfied enough to smile at the sight of the hunter's body on the platform floor. I didn't have any extra time to process those feelings, though. The noise of battle was suddenly punctuated by an eruption of screaming. I returned Mira's katana to its sheath on my back and slid down the ladder. Returning to street level, I recovered Mira's shotgun and reached Chihiro just as she was revived by Isis's drone. "What's going on?" I demanded. "Jericho's burning the alien lines," Isis reported. "She's just made a freaking tornado of soul fire." Chihiro, Isis, and I ran through the wrecked neighborhood to catch up with the XCOM attackers. Sure enough, Isis was right. A massive, swirling vortex had somehow appeared in the cavernous chamber and was now tearing through the enemy lines. "Damn," Chihiro breathed. "If Ignatius tried something like that, he'd exhaust himself in 5 minutes." "Jericho doesn't have to worry about that." Akira had rejoined us. She was watching Jericho unleash hell on the enemy with a knowing look. "It's her unique power," Akira explained. "Jericho can do whatever she wants with the gift, because she'll never exhaust her powers." Isis and I both let out low whistles. "How the hell is that possible?" Chihiro asked. "You can't just create energy out of thin air." "She's not," Akira clarified. "She's drawing energy out of all living things around her, passively, all the time." I felt my stomach lurch as a realization hit me. Wait a minute. So, back in Pyongyang, when Jericho said she needed to recharge, she was... "Yeah," Akira confirmed. "And now she's drawing energy from friend and foe alike. The Elders keep sending more and more aliens to fight us, each one adding to Jericho's powers without realizing it. Dad, when we get to the crypt, I need you to draw the enemy out. Provoke the biggest fight you possibly can, and we'll win this thing. Overwhelmed by Jericho's latest attack, the enemy broke and retreated once more. The final platoon reformed and pressed the attack again, erupting out of the foe neighborhood and into a wide, multi-tiered area filled with large alien machinery. "This is it," Mira called out to the troops. "This is the foundry where avatars are made." Before we could get a chance to destroy anything, the alien defenders had reformed their battle lines and returned to fight us again. "They've got reinforcements," Hal shouted. 4, maybe 5 platoons. "It's a whole feckin' company," Kathleen confirmed. "We've ready to shut the hornet's nest now." A whole new conflagration erupted in the Avatar Foundry. Ignatius dropped his unused rifle and raised both of his arms, creating a huge psionic shield around the final platoon. The air was so thick with gunfire that Gauss slugs and conventional bullets rained down on the floor after hitting one another in flight. The snaps and pops of lethal projectiles melded together into a constant, deadly roar. The foundry became hot as Jericho, Akira, Chihiro, Mira, Ignatius, Dwayne, the Templars, and several Advent priests and sectoids unleashed the full spectrum of psionic powers against one another. Chihiro got close enough to me at one point to share her powers with me, and I took full advantage of them. Using Mira's katana to channel my shared gift, I fired beams of energy across the chaotic battle space, dropping anything that wasn't under Ignatius's protective field. I noticed that my psionic powers were much more potent if I channeled them through the katana, so I made heavy use of the sword as I blasted the enemy back with telekinetic force. The katana itself seemed to be quite thankful to be used in this way. As for the rest of the battle, I couldn't see what was what anymore. There was too much movement, too many muzzle flashes, too many pulses of violet and purple light. "From here, we can call upon endless legions of reinforcements. You will be overrun, yet our armies could be withdrawn at any time, Jericho. Peace is within your grasp, if you would only join us." "Never!" To the shock of friend and foe alike, Jericho leapt into the air and flew a short distance, landing smack in the middle of a huge group of alien fighters. Before they could do anything more than blink, a lightning storm erupted out of Jericho's body, striking down everything in her immediate vicinity. The light radiating away from Jericho was just as intense as a flashbang grenade. When the storm finally subsided, I could see that Jericho had punched a hole so big in the enemy force that we were basically fighting 2 smaller groups of enemies now, instead of 1 large unit. "Keep moving up," I ordered the troops. "Punch through that hole." "You are capable of so much more, Jericho," the Angelus Ethereal pleaded. "Yet you fail to grasp the true nature of your power. Join us and your world will live on. Resist, and there will be nothing left to save." A group of alien handlers turned a pack of chrysalids loose on the battlefield. The monstrous insectoids ran rampant, attacking enemy and ally alike. "Focus fire on the monsters," Mira told me. "My daughter and I will clear the way." The men and women of the final platoon shifted their fire toward the incoming horde, while Jericho and Mira stood side by side, venting psychokinetic destruction down upon the enemy force. "Here come the bugs!" Isis yelled. "Melee fighters, move up and spread out," I ordered. "Sharpshooters and specialists, uncover to the left. Set up overlapping kill zones." Rangers and Templars moved to the front of XCOM's lines and spread themselves as far apart as they could. Swords and shard blades were brought to bear, while snipers and rifle marksmen set up behind the left shoulders of each soldier. Like my fellow Rangers and Templars, I took a knee, while behind me, Chihiro raised her laser sniper rifle and unleashed her first volley. Nearly a dozen chrysalids were knocked down by the first hailstorm of fire, and only 8 actually got close enough to our line to be a threat. I slashed Mira's sword at the nearest bug and took its head clean off. The sword seemed to growl with pleasure as I turned and struck down a second chrysalid that got too close. Dwayne Gardner got 2 more, and by the time the last 4 bugs were downed, Mira and Jericho had cleared out most of the enemy force, opening the way forward. "You view us as conquerors of your world, but that was never our intent," the Angelus Ethereal protested telepathically. "Each species you've encountered, the aliens, you have fought and slaughtered. None were given a choice. Our home was the oldest of worlds, and the first to be consumed. Billions were lost. If only that were the end." "If you want our pity, you're 20 years too late," Jericho shouted. "We're not going to join your slave army." "Yeah," Sophie chimed in. "If anything, they should join us." "Our power does not waver. You will find our forces here loyal. They require no coercion, for they know failure here means the end for all." True to the words of the Angelus Ethereal, the last remaining alien fighters broke cover and committed themselves to one last suicide charge against our lines. The final platoon dug in and held firm. Refusing to give an inch, we fired into the enemy formation unceasingly until every alien had dropped to the floor, and at long last, there was complete, blissful silence. We had secured the Avatar Foundry. "Specialists, see to the wounded," I ordered. "Grenadiers, scrap everything in here. Sharpshooters and rangers, cover the doors." Odette, Tsubaki, and Isis both sent their gremlin drones buzzing around the foundry to check on their fellow soldiers, while Holly, Hal, Yutaka, and Matthew joined the grenadiers from other squads in their efforts to affix thermite charges to any piece of machinery that could have been used in the construction of an avatar, which is pretty much everything in the room. Finally, after a few moments, I received a casualty report. 2 soldiers were dead, and 3 more had been wounded, not including me. American soldier Andrea Baker had been blown up by the main cannon of a sectopod. Bernard von Unfall, despite being taken to safety and treated by Tsubaki, had died of his wounds after being shot by the chosen hunter. Once I dismissed the medics, Mira and Jericho approached me. "Through there," Mira pointed toward a very large door at the far end of the foundry. "Finished avatars would go there, to the Crypt of the Elders. Each avatar was paired to an elder and would become their new body." "How many?" I asked. 4 were made," Mira replied. "However, 1 has already been removed from the elder's possession." Mira gestured to her new body. "Which means we're going to have to fight 3 avatars in there," Jericho told me. "Things are going to get chaotic really fast, Blake. Is everyone ready?" I nodded, looking Jericho squarely in the eyes. "Don't worry," I said. "The final platoon will support you. We've got your back." "The whole platoon? Really?" Jericho looked taken aback. "Come on, you don't need to." I put one hand on her shoulder. "The Elders are right about one thing, Jericho. You are special and capable of so much more. But not because the Elders see value in you. Your parents, your real ones, knew there was going to be something unique about you before Dr. Valen ever picked them for the Jericho project." "He is right," Mira said. "The Elders do not desire you because they respect your power. The Elders fear you as they should. You represent success where the Elders found only failure. You are the future the Elders sought in vain. A perfect union of old and new, the physical and psionic. You are the only true avatar among us, an avatar of freedom." Jericho took a deep breath, then chuckled. "No pressure, huh?" she sighed. "Just promise me one thing, both of you." "Anything," Mira replied. "What is it?" I asked. Jericho pointed to someone behind us. "Burn his notebook." Looking around, I spotted Dwayne Gardner. He was standing a few feet away from us, clearly eavesdropping. He had a pen and notebook in his hand and appeared to be scribbling something down. When he looked up and spotted us, Dwayne quickly returned the pad of paper to his pocket, but not before I saw that he had written the phrases "Elders fear her," "Perfect union," and "Avatar of freedom." I shot Dwayne an angry look and replied to Jericho, "Yeah, consider it done." Finally, we were ready. Unfortunately, the 3 wounded soldiers from the previous fight were too badly injured to carry on. We sent them back to the Psionic Gate, but couldn't spare anyone for an escort. We just had to cross our fingers and hope they made it back safely. Including myself, there were 47 soldiers left in the final platoon, ready to breach the final doorway and enter the Crypt of the Elders. I took point with Dwayne, Sophie, Akira, and Ignatius. The rest of the platoon stacked up behind and around us. We were ready to surge through the doorway in the largest breach and clear strike of XCOM's history. "We all know what's on the other side of this door," I told my troops. "Is everyone ready? Does anybody have any, famous last words?" A hearty laugh went through the platoon, infused with nervousness. But as the nervous chuckle subsided, Chaplain Ignatius Petoskey bowed his head as if in prayer and recited these words from a 19th century poem. "Then outspake brave Horatius, the captain of the gate, to every man upon this earth death cometh soon or late. And how can man die better than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers and the temples of his gods?" And on that note, we breached the Crypt of the Elders. "Your form is but a shadow of our truth. We seek to defy that which would consume us all. Your efforts deny the sacrifice of those who came before. You leave us no choice." The Crypt of the Elders was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. This massive underwater temple had no walls or ceiling. Instead, the vast expanse of the surrounding oceans was held at bay by some invisible, most likely psionic, force. Great gilded platforms rose up from the middle of the floor, each one containing a long black and gold structure. All around the edges of the crypt were a series of staircases. At the top of each one was a platform containing a psionic gate. In total, there were 8 of these gates scattered around the room. Finally, there was a huge structure in the center of the room. A 2-story cube with translucent walls was filled with a yellowish-green substance, jellied alarium. I could vaguely make out the shape of some kind of alien creature suspended in the fluid, unmoving. When we arrived, the crypt was empty, yet I couldn't help but get the feeling that we were being watched. Slowly, cautiously, we began to fan out and search for the enemy. Mira had said there would be 3 avatars in here. 47 men and women took to searching the room in pairs, while Akira broke off from the group to inspect the central tower. Chihiro and I saw her and cautiously walked towards her position. We only got about halfway, though, when we heard a shout. "Oh my God!" Dashing over to where we heard the noise, we saw that Sophie Ackerman was pointing to one of the long gold objects with a shaking finger. Sophie stammered. It's an ethereal!" I looked down. Everybody looked down. My blood ran cold as I finally understood what I was looking at. These long gold objects were sarcophagi. Not like the psionic slab we'd seen in the chosen strongholds, no. These were real, ceremonial coffins, with transparent lids that allowed us to see their interiors. Lying on its back, the head of its casket resting against a pillar, was an elder, an ethereal. An atmosphere of genuine terror descended on the room. 20 years ago, it had taken a fully armed squad of XCOM soldiers to bring down a single ethereal. And even then, we had just barely managed to escape with our lives that night. Looking around, I got a quick count. 26. There were 26 ethereals in this room. Some of the caskets were arranged on the floor in neat patterns. Others were standing on their feet and bolted to the walls of elevated platforms. Now that we knew what was in the room with us, we were all starting to sense the incredible amounts of psionic energy hanging in the air around us. "Mira," I said slowly. "They are awake," Mira replied in a soft tone. "They are conscious." As if in response, a movement caught all of our attention. Akira jumped backwards from the central tower, having just placed her hand on the glass. For the first time that I knew of, Akira, the time traveler who had crossed the universe and manipulated so much of history, looked genuinely terrified. Something had deeply disturbed her. "No," Akira gasped, staring at the unknown creature drifting in that huge vat of Alarium. It can't be." A billowing blue and purple mist began to rise up from the central tower. And as the men and women of the final platoon watched, slack-jawed, this cloud of shimmering psionic energy reshaped itself into the ghostly image of the Angelus Ethereal. "When we first encountered Earth, we wept for a broken world," the Angelus Ethereal addressed the whole platoon. "For a tortured race crying out to the stars in agony. We answered your call. We saw your true potential." "Liar!" Palestinian soldier Carmina Isra shouted from the ranks of Second Squad. "You invaded our world! You enslaved us!" "The first invasion was a test," the Angelus Ethereal countered. "But your people did not fail as you believe. You succeeded beyond measure. You need only accept your place among us. Jericho, come to us. Save your world." Moving as one, the soldiers of the final platoon moved to surround Jericho, shielding her from the Angelus Ethereal's sight. Jericho, Ignatius, and I stood at the front of the pack, staring down the self-imposed God King of our world. "I believe we have passed the point of rational discourse," Ignatius said. "We didn't come here to talk," I added. "We're here to remove you from our world," Chihiro finished. "By force." And then Chihiro drew her Shadowkeeper pistol, aimed at the nearest sarcophagus, and shot an ethereal in the head. That was the moment when hell itself was unleashed. All of the psionic gates around the perimeter came to life. Aliens of every type and variant began to flow into the room, armed to the teeth. There were sectoids, chrysalids, archons, mutons, berserkers, faceless, and vipers. A flickering swarm of codices preceded a trio of sectopod and a dozen mech troopers. Alien monsters we'd never seen before joined the fray as well. The final platoon fought back with every weapon in the XCOM arsenal. Rockets and grenades blasted away at the larger targets. Laser cannons and heavy machine guns brought to bear against the horde. Gauss rifles and coil guns sniped at distant targets with pinpoint accuracy. Bullpup rifles chattered away. Shard blades sliced and slashed, while psionic amplifiers lit up the environment with an eerie aura. The specter of the Angelus Ethereal joined the fight as well. Great crimson lances descended from the ceiling and struck one of Praetor Mox's skirmishers, killing him instantly. Ignatius pointed both of his palms at the watery sky, shielding his comrades from the assault. In the midst of it all, an Advent soldier armed with a flamethrower forced our troops to scatter. The swirling cone of fire roared across the battlefield, enveloping several of our own soldiers. I ran forward and pushed Chihiro to the ground to save her from the same fate. As we stood up, though, Chihiro saw something that made her scream. "Fire!" Chihiro shouted. "She's on fire!" Sofia Kuznetsova had gotten caught in the flamethrower's path. She dropped her weapons and ran across the crypt, screaming and flailing her arms. I jumped to my feet and blasted the enemy with my shotgun. The flamethrower's fuel tank ruptured and sent a huge fireball into the air. "Icarus!" I yelled. "Help Antigone!" Seemingly out of nowhere, Sophie Ackerman fought her way through the battling crowd, reached Sophia and tackled her to the floor, smothering the flames with her own body. A concussive blast extinguished the flamethrower's handiwork, and I looked around to see where it had come from. In the middle of the crypt, Akira had just used her powers to smash the central tower, only to be blocked by... "Avatar!" I shouted. "Anyone who's got a shot, take it now!" Akira opened her palm and fired a psi-volt into the first Avatar's chest. The enemy hybrid immediately teleported away from view, allowing Akira to continue hitting the tower with psionic blasts. Something hit me in the back with the force of a freight train. I fell forward and quickly scrambled to see a muton. It was already charging towards me again, serrated bayonet at the ready, when I blasted it twice with the Arashi. The huge alien staggered and recovered, only to get hit in the side by a sniper rifle blast. The muton keeled over, and I saw Chihiro, who was already on the move again. "Now we're even!" I shouted to her. "Not for long!" Chihiro yelled. "Avatar, behind you to the left, 60 yards!" Chihiro raised her rifle and fired. The first Avatar was hit squarely in the chest. It jumped into the air and vanished inside of a tiny psionic rift. A second later, the rift opened up just 10 feet away from me. I pumped my shotgun, raised it to shoulder height, and shouted, "Off my planet!" One in the chest, one in the head. The first Avatar was dead before it hit the ground. If anything, this made the enemy even more desperate. More and more soldiers funneled out of the side gates. The Angelus Ethereal intensified her attacks, and something on our side finally gave out. Above the final platoon, the psionic shield Ignatius had been using to protect us from the Angelus Ethereal flickered and went out. I looked around at our old chaplain, just in time to see the color leave his eyes and his psionic amplifier blink one last time before extinguishing itself. Ignatius Petoskey had exhausted his powers. Unimpeded at last, the enemy began to rain death down upon the final platoon. Missiles and psionic lances began to rain down on us from above. Akira was struck and knocked to the ground by something I didn't see. Soylent was blasted off his feet by the Angelus Ethereal, and alien grenades rained down near Holly's position. The British colonel dropped her machine gun and hunkered down behind cover, both of her hands too badly maimed to be useful anymore. A psionic lance struck Ignatius with such incredible force that his entire right arm was torn off. Men and women were being downed all over the battlefield. "We're losing control in a right hurry!" Kathleen shouted. "What do we do?" "Jericho!" I hollered while beating back a viper with my sword. "Give us some fucking breathing space!" I saw, just for a fraction of a moment, a bright violet or pink ball of energy sail through the air before smashing into the ground on the far side of the crypt. Psionic energy exploded forth and enveloped itself around the corpses of several dead aliens. Never thought I'd be happy to say this, but I felt my spirits rising alongside the dead. Jericho's impromptu zombie horde charged forward and hit the enemy from the back. Meanwhile, Akira did her part to help lift the pressure. Slamming her hand to the floor, she sent a pulse of psionic energy running along the floor towards the corpse of the first Avatar. A glowing silhouette separated itself from the dead Avatar and stood upright. At Akira's command, the psionic ghost joined the fray, wielding the same powers as Akira herself. Meanwhile, Holly and the Grenadiers had used their last rocket launcher. They stormed up one of the staircases and finally managed to lock down one of the elevated platforms with a psi gate. Having finally secured some high ground, the Grenadiers used their machine guns to turn the tide of battle just as the second Avatar appeared on the opposite end of the chamber. "Fangirl! Draw that thing into the open!" I ordered. "Fourth squad, mow it down!" Using our last mimic beacon, Tsubaki caught the attention of the second avatar and drew it away from the main body of the platoon. On Dwayne's order, the Templars of 4th Squad surged into the fray and... well, I didn't see what happened next. I turned away from the second avatar and started moving along XCOM's battle line. I second-guessed myself right away. Why the hell was I doing this? I wanted to help fight the avatar, not inspect the troops. I tried to turn back, but a voice spoke up in the back of my mind. Kill the betrayer. Oh, shit. How long had I been under mind control? I frantically tried to refocus my mind to break free, but I had no idea who had me. Somebody else was controlling my body all of a sudden, and I was just a passenger along for the ride at this point. I felt my hands reloading the Arashi and commanded them to stop, but nothing happened. The alien voice began to repeat the mantra in my head. Kill the betrayer! Kill the betrayer! The betrayer! Panicking, I reached out telepathically to try and contact Chihiro. Almost as soon as I reached out to her, she reciprocated. At least mind control couldn't overpower our link. Hold on, Blake. I'll find the controller. Just hang in there. Fighting the influence of the controller as hard as I could, I felt my body sidestep around Hal and come to a stop near the central tower, where Mira and Jericho were standing together, firing their weapons at a Muton Berserker. Against my will, my arms raised the Arashi to shoulder height. I tried to force my mouth open to scream a warning. No, I won't do it. Kill the betrayer. No, kill the betrayer. I won't. At the last second, I got just a little control back. As I pulled the trigger with my right hand, I jerked my left in the first direction I could think of. The Arashi went off. Mira stumbled as she was hit, but she was still alive. The former chosen assassin quickly recovered and looked around at me. I couldn't see her face through that mask, so I desperately thought to myself, hoping she could hear. I'm under mind control! Help! Mira must have gotten the message, because she acted right away. Before my body could be forced to fire the Arashi a second time, Mira had crossed the distance between us and grabbed me by the head. I felt a charge running through my skull, which distracted from the fact that Mira threw me to the ground very hard. Whatever she'd done had worked, though, because when I heard Chihiro's voice, my body obeyed my command to turn and look at her. There's another avatar, Chihiro was saying. The last two avatars are on the field right now. They're both here? Mira repeated. Then we can finally end this. We must focus our efforts. Jericho picked up the Arashi and tossed it back to me. Mira, we're going to finish off the avatars. Keep the big one off our backs. Blake, Chi, hold on. Psionic energy enveloped all three of us as we rode into the air. Levitating up to the top of the central tower, the three of us now had a good view of the battle below. It was chaos. All semblance of battle lines had been abandoned, and the battle had descended into 100 skirmishes and firefights that overlapped and clashed with one another. Above it all, the Angelus Ethereal had stopped raining psionic lightning onto our side, because she had noticed us. The spectral ethereal flew across the crypt, arms outstretched towards us. Before Blake, Jericho, or I could do anything, her advance was halted. Mira had fired a Psi Volt at the Angelus Ethereal to get her attention, and the enemy broke off to change targets. Betrayer! The Angelus Ethereal shouted at Mira before it attacked. While Mira engaged the Angelus Ethereal, Chihiro and I spotted one of the avatars. It carved a path of death and destruction through the combating forces, coming towards the central tower. It's going for Akira! Chihiro pointed. Down below, Akira herself had just killed an Advent priest and picked up his amplifier off the ground. Akira! I yelled. Avatar, behind you! Spotting the avatar just in time, Akira lashed out before it could attack. Just like in Vladivostok, 6 translucent tentacles reached up from the floor and seized the avatar, forcing it high into the air, where it struggled and flailed in vain. Focus fire! I yelled. Everybody take that thing down! All at once, nearly half of the final platoon turned their weapons against the helpless enemy. Suspended in mid-air with no possible defense, the second avatar was annihilated so completely that nothing remained of it when the smoke cleared. And then there was only one. Only one avatar remained, and the battle had now definitively turned in XCOM's favor. Nearly half of the Elder sarcophagi had been damaged or destroyed in the conflagration of battle, killing their occupants. 2 more ethereals had died alongside their corresponding avatars. With nearly half of all the Elders dead, the psionic network they used to command their troops had been crippled. The reinforcements coming through the Psi gates had slowed to a trickle, and after a further 5 minutes of fighting, all 8 Psi gates were firmly under XCOM control, and our specialists were hard at work stopping the flow of Advent soldiers entirely. Meanwhile, Mira, Jericho, Chihiro, Dwayne, and the Templars had set to work cornering the final avatar. The final bout of psionic combat was vicious and brutal as the Angelus Ethereal had attached itself directly to the final avatar. It fought with her strength and powers. Determined to stop the last avatar from escaping, Chihiro and I guarded the flanks. Sharing her powers with me again, Chihiro and I both used psionic shields to box the avatar in and force it backwards towards the outer edge of the temple, where the only thing separating us from the vast ocean around us was a psionic bubble. The Angelus avatar lashed out, striking at all of us and causing our shields to ripple. No! The Angelus avatar was pleading with us. Your victory here means the end for all others. It will follow you as it followed us. You are not ready. We must not fail. Jericho stepped forward and fired a continuous beam of light from her hand toward the Angelus avatar. The enemy conjured one last shield, dispersing the beam around itself like water around a rock. It doesn't matter if we're ready or not. You must fail, Jericho shouted. And no matter what comes at us next, we'll find a way to survive. We'll adapt and overcome anything that comes our way, because that's what humans do. Jericho pushed her hand forward and intensified her final attack. I had to hold my own hand up to my eyes and squint to be able to see what was going on. Finally, with one last push, Jericho's beam broke through the shield and connected with the Angelus avatar's chest. The ethereal being screamed. It was an unnatural, unearthly sound that made my ears hurt. "This is not your path!" the dying ethereal shrieked. "Not your purpose! You need our guidance to hone this power! Without us, what are you?" I was so busy protecting my eyes from the intense light that I wasn't ready for the explosion. A powerful shockwave hit us and we were all thrown back. Blinking rapidly to get the stars out of my eyes, I climbed back to my feet as quickly as I could and tried to make sense of the scene around me. The crypt of the ethereals was trashed. No more or less than 6 of the Elder sarcophagi were intact, and the floor was so badly strewn with the bodies of humans and aliens alike that it was impossible to walk at a normal pace. The 6 surviving members of the final platoon were picking through the wreckage, either trying to dig the wounded out of the wreckage or find the bodies of the fallen. And in the middle of it all, Akira was standing in the middle of the room, staring at what had once been the central tower. The glass panes had shattered, causing the Illyrium slurry within to spill all over the crypt. Akira was standing just outside the spill zone. I walked gingerly across the sea of bodies to reach her, curious. I was wondering if she'd spotted the mysterious creature we'd seen drifting in the tank before it burst. "Akira," I called out. "Is everything all right?" Slowly, Akira turned to face me. The expression of pure terror on her face caused me to stop in my tracks. They had one," Akira stammered. The genuine fear in her voice was unmistakable. "It was right here. How long was it here for?" "What was?" I asked. "What did the elders have?" Before I could get an answer, the crypt shook. Water and Illyrium sloshed around, and everybody shouted and exclaimed. Earthquake! Soylent yelled. Don't be such a crybaby. Chihiro's confidence came from the fact that she was raised in a country known for earthquakes. That wasn't even a level 4 quake. The shaking started again, this time vigorous enough to make Chihiro shut up. Akira, I started to say. Run. What's going? Run! Akira screamed at the top of her lungs. Everyone, get to a Psi Gate! Run! One more time, the alien fortress quaked. There was no mistaking the signs this time. The place is coming apart, I shouted. Specialists, point a Psi Gate at the Avenger and let's get out of here! Out of my way, Mira shouted. The former chosen assassin put one hand on the crescent pylon of the nearest Psi Gate and poured energy into it until the gateway surged to life. She started waving XCOM troops through the activated gateway, pushing the more hesitant soldiers over the threshold. Everyone into the gate, Mira shouted. The crypt is collapsing. Go, go, go! A violent crashing sound came from deep within the fortress. The whole place was coming down. In just 1 minute, the whole structure was going to be an underwater grave. I stayed just long enough to watch Chihiro jump through the Psi Gate, and then, clutching both of my weapons tightly, I threw myself into the gate. Mira was the last person through. As soon as she reappeared in the Avenger's shadow chamber, a torrent of seawater erupted through the Psi Gate and nearly washed away both Taigen and Shen. After a panicked moment, Taigen managed to press the emergency kill switch, shutting off all power to the shadow chamber and deactivating the Psionic Gate. The doorway swung open, draining several hundred gallons of salt water into the hallway. Commanders Bradford and Harper saw the room crowded with 34 tired and battered soldiers, all of whom were covered in blood and seawater. Almost sarcastically, Harper said, "What the hell happened in there?" Jericho flashed the thumbs up and said, "Mission accomplished, Commander."